show me irrefutable proof of God, I will pay you $500.
So firstly, I don't want the money. I'm going to talk really fast, so please try and keep up, and I'm going to have to make a part 2 because there's just not enough time. So this is a deductive argument which uses set premises and sound logic to come to a conclusion. Math is also deduction, so it's the same kind of thing. So the first premise is everything in the universe and the universe itself is something called a possible existence, which means it's finite, it's temporary, it began to exist, it only exists because something else exists, or it only exists because it comes from something. And if the universe began to exist, then everything in the universe and the universe itself comes from something else before it. And no, I'm not going to say, okay, therefore God. Just wait. Let's say our universe came from another universe, and then that universe came from another one, and then it goes back into infinity. This is called the infinite regression fallacy, and it's illogical. I'll summarize it with this analogy. If the distance from me to you was an infinite distance, how long would it take for me to get to you? An infinite amount of time, which means I would never actually reach you. The fact that we exist shows that it's not an infinite chain going back. It starts at one place, and I'm going to explain the rest in part 2. This is part 2 on proof that God exists. Just to recap, premise 1, everything in the universe and the universe as a whole is a possible existence. Premise 2, you cannot have an infinite chain of things coming from other things. This is called the infinite regression fallacy, because if this was the case, an infinite amount of things would have to be created or exist for us to be created or for us to exist, so we would never actually exist. From this, we can conclude that this starts at one place, and this one place must be the opposite of a possible existence. It must be infinite, it must be independent, it must not rely on anything, it must not come from anything, and it must be able to exist by itself based on its necessary traits. Now let's take it a step further. This existence is necessary, which means it doesn't need us to exist, but we exist, which means it wills for us or it allows for us to exist. On top of that, to create, it must have creative capabilities, it must have creative capacity, it must have knowledge, it must be wise, it must be the most powerful thing in existence by necessity. And we're just beginning to describe the most basic understanding of God. I wasn't going to make a part 3, but I might as well. Because I know people like Alexander Arbidian who say things like, oh, how do you know that it has a will and not just some random nature where it's like a universe popping machine or something. I would now like to introduce you guys to a person named Stephen Meyer or Stephen Meyer. He is a philosopher of science and he advocates for something called the intelligent design argument. The argument is pretty straightforward. You can read his works on it. He has a lot of great books, including Darwin's Doubt. So the argument is very simple. It's basically we've never seen or observed or known of anything that's intelligently designed that comes from anything other than intelligence. For example, we've never seen language or something come from like random nature or something misguided, but our DNA is a form of language. And he explains why believing something like misguided intelligent design that does not come from intelligence would be illogical to believe. So we can conclude that not only is there a necessary existence, but this necessary existence has intelligence and a will. Thank you.